Have you ever felt stuck, unsure which direction to go? Maybe you're second guessing your career, feeling held back by imposter syndrome, overwhelmed by choices, or wondering if it's too late to rewrite your story. If any of that sounds familiar, this episode is for you. I'm joined by author, coach, and founder of The Art of Potential, Kristin Hiemstra. We talk about navigating non-linear careers, building confidence through trial and error, raising kids who lead themselves, and how to develop a strong internal compass at any age. Kristin offers practical wisdom, hard-won lessons, and mindset shifts that just might change how you see your own potential. Welcome to Building Thinkers. Kristin, will you start by telling us a little bit of your story? What is it that brought you to the work that you're doing today?
Just the two main points is listening to kind of my inner guidance, which led me on all kinds of very wild and woolly pathways. And then just continuing to plod, perseverance and plodding along the whole time. So just as a backstory, I started my career in DC working for nonprofits. Then I worked for what are called NGOs, non-government organizations. I worked for an association. I worked at a communications firm. I was a school counselor for 2 decades. I've run a couple businesses. So I have a very varied career path.
I love it. I think it's so interesting to find kind of the squiggly paths of career that people end up taking and just all of the insights that come along that. I also like to ask, because it's the Building Thinkers podcast, now in your work, what would you say that you build if you had to word it that way?
I help people build themselves. So it doesn't matter if it's a corporate person or a teenager, or it doesn't matter. My focus is really on giving people that creative power.
When you think about the people that you help build themselves, I saw that somewhere you termed it like the self-leadership, right?
Yeah.
That you access that and build that piece. What are some of the things that you've seen over your career be the recurring themes that stand in people's way? Or like, why do they come to you?
People come with all kinds of things, but I've really over the years distilled it down to the one thing that I would say that I do, for the best way to describe it, is I help give people what I'll call a skeleton key, so they can use it for anything that they're facing. And most of the time, whatever they're facing is, you're going to find the narrative generated from within them. So whether it's me teaching my MBA students and we're dealing with a corporate problem or a personal problem or any of the other things that come my way, it's usually a narrative that's been created that needs some adjustment. So I'll give you a specific example. I was talking to a graduate student who is about to go into a 3-year graduate program. And she was saying, by the end of this program, I'm going to be broke. So I'm going to need to be thinking about things in the future. And I appreciated that. But I said, why don't we just change the dialogue a little bit so that it becomes, I don't know where I'll be financially in the future, because this could be the richest time of your life. You could have so much creative energy. So let's not put parameters around it. Let's not stop that flow of energy from coming in or going out. And that's just a small sample. Everybody has these different ways of thinking about things. They're the stories we tell ourselves, right? And so the stories you tell yourself are going to elicit a certain set of emotions. So when we can go in and configure those to where you want to go, whether it's creating an organizational culture, whether it's dealing with your temper, whether it's reaching your next goal, whether it's raising a healthy kid, like all of it is going to come down to that.
So if people are able to challenge and maybe like rewrite the stories that they tell themselves, do you think that that's the skeleton key that you're talking about that can unlock any area?
Yeah, and being able to identify it and being able to sit with it, because a lot of times, and you know this, Tracy, anybody listening knows that the problem you see isn't the real problem. The real problem's like 200 levels down from what you're seeing. You know what I mean? It's like give a mouse a cookie and then you just start unpacking and you get way down. But that's the beauty of it, because way down there, that is where your vulnerabilities are. And often it's in your shadow side or your vulnerable side that things are festering, or you're trying to protect it, or the messaging is wrong. And so that is a big part of things.
What if you intellectually understand the story you're telling yourself,
Right.
but then you can't debunk it? Is that where you need help to you understand it,
Right.
but it stays there, it's stuck? I'm asking this because
Yeah.
I hear people say, like, that's what people are trying to figure out, is like, okay, I know I'm telling myself, and maybe I even know why, but I
Right.
don't know how to do the work of not only maybe rewriting it, but having that new story sink in, have the new neural pathways be like deep.
Right. So that's the work. That is the work. And the rewriting is actually it's the 200th level. It's all the way down. And so it requires a ton of self-reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you're holding on to the idea that give me an example. Why don't you give me an example and I'll work through it?
Okay. I think a lot of people are stuck on, I want something. I want to be able to do something, but I don't think I'm good enough. I think that's a recurring one.
Okay, so it would be kind of an imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I'm not good enough to do this. So this is going to sound so, oh, it is just what it is. Women do that a lot more than men. Let me just put that out there. So women have a lot more imposter syndrome. They have to be complete experts at something before they will come in and say they're an expert. Men have this, and we need to learn this. This is not negative towards men. Men are like, I'll figure it out as I go. And then by the end of this, I will be. There is beauty in that. There is beauty in that boldness. So what women need to do, first of all, is take a page from that confidence. There's a lot to be learned because we're all learning all the time. I saw this a ton when I was actually a school counselor. That's when I saw it the most. Like my girl students would come in and they'd be so much more accomplished on paper. They'd be like, oh, I just don't know I'm as smart as so-and-so. And I'm like, oh, good Lord. Like the statistics are well in your favor. But the mindset wasn't there, right? So it's all about your mindset. So one way you can get there is by saying, is the opposite true? And look at the opposite side of things. Because chances are, if you were to say, I'm not an expert at this, and then I said, well, what's the opposite of that? And then what we could get at is, well, actually, I do know more about this than other people. And sometimes that's the way that you need to step up. It's gradual. So let's say that you are not an expert on ice cream, but you want to be an expert on ice cream. Mm-hmm. You've tried every flavor. You know how to make it. You know the big players out there. You have a general, but you don't own that space yet in your mind and in your heart. So what you do is you change the script to gradually get you there, which would be something like, I do know more about ice cream than most people. Typically, that's a confident place people can go where they feel like, if I'm king of the mountain, I can defend that position because I do know more about ice cream than most people, right? Yeah. And then you kind of work your way up from there. And that helps you to dip your toes gradually into the imposter syndrome. And I did a whole workshop for UNC graduate students, and it was shocking. I mean, these people have studied subjects for years and years, and the imposter syndrome is so strong because they're comparing themselves to somebody who has 20 years of experience. And that's the other thing you can do. I'm not as knowledgeable as Tracy because Tracy's been doing this for 5 years and I'm just starting. Well, that's okay. You don't have to be as knowledgeable as Tracy, but you're still more knowledgeable than the other people that you're thinking about in your mind.
Right.
And the other thing to really come to terms with is that we all bring something unique to the conversation. And your beauty, Robin Williams said it's in your, what did he call it? A flash of madness, your spark of madness. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's your madness, but whatever you're contributing to the conversation is going to be a little different and expand the conversation. So stand in that with some pride. Like, what I bring is a different way of thinking about it. And even if you're wrong, you're going to find out you're wrong and you're just going to keep going. So many people get derailed when they do something wrong, like this shame and this guilt and this, oh my God, like, ooh. But no, you're going to get it wrong before you get it right. That's just how that works.
One of the personal soundtracks I use in this area, that's what I like to call the stories we tell ourselves, the soundtracks, is If Not Me, Then Who?
Yeah.
And that one has helped me before. I'm sitting there like working on like a project proposal for a big client. And I'm sitting there like, oh, is this right? Are these the right people to bring into it? Is this the right budget? That seems like, a big ask. And then I'm like, if not me, then who? I'm the right person to do this work. I'm the right person to at least pitch to do this work in the space that I want to be in. And then you know what? What happens on the other side from that, I think, rooted confidence.
Yeah.
It's not totally in dreamland somewhere. It's things that we're showing up to do that we really are either capable of doing now, or to your point, figuring out along the way. That is one of the other strategies that I've used. I specifically put in for a presentation proposal. This was like 7 years ago on a topic I wanted to learn more about. Yeah. I made the title. I knew what I wanted to discuss. I wasn't an expert in the area, but I was like, I want to speak more to this. So I made the presentation proposal. Then it got accepted. Then I had to do the work.
Yep.
Put in to learn that topic. So that's a couple of the ways I go at that.
I love that, Tracy.
Maybe it's helpful for me to unpack one of my own that just came to mind too, is I used to think, so I'm started as a solopreneur, have had my business since 2015, did other things before that. I used to think, because it was mostly only me and some contract workers at the time, that I couldn't compete with the big consulting firms because it's only me and they're like, it's only you. However, now I think many of my clients really like that it will actually be me doing the consulting work, right, and then it's not some other, no offense, junior consultant that will be delegated the work to by a giant conglomeration that might change 10 times in between now and then.
That's your
way to think about it.
No, it is. And that's, I hope everybody takes away from that. I mean, that is your benefit. That is what sells you. And you always lean in hard to what your unique value proposition is. And I'm going to go on a totally different tangent. But so I was in education for 20 years and I still help students apply to college. That's a part of the consulting that I do. And I'm very much about whatever it is that's unique to you. That's what we lean into, because if you try to be like everybody else, there's no way you're standing out.
So under the art of potential, how can we start with here? Let's just do some definitions. How do you think about potential?
Potential to me is just unlimited. It's the possibility of what can be. It's actually neutral. It's not good. It's not bad. It's whatever can be.
Okay. And so when people come to you, I'm assuming they want to tap in to more of that. They want to, if potential is neutral, they want like the positive side of it. And so where do you start? And maybe it's somebody that doesn't yet know what makes them unique and they're trying to find that.
Sure. So the first place I'm going to start with somebody, and I'm just going to talk you through if I'm working with somebody who's having a career change, because a lot of times that's what it is. The first thing I want to know is, what did you play when you were a kid? Mm-hmm. And what was important to you as a kid? Because that's actually your most pure form of interest. I was working with a woman this weekend, and she does apartment development. And she let it slip out. She's like, oh yeah, when I was a kid, I used to play real estate. We go around and we pretend that we were going to buy and sell houses. And I was like, oh, it's no surprise you ended up working for the largest apartment. She's way high up there in corporate. buying and selling apartments, so you want to find out, was it teacher, was it house, like whatever it is, because that you're going to have, like, everybody's going to have different stepping stones or lampposts or whatever you want to call them, but things along the way that are going to inform your journey. And I often say that it's like a video game. You want to go and get the gold from whatever level you're at, because you're going to use it later, even though you don't know how yet. So definitely start with that. And then the next thing that's going to come into play, that's a very powerful driver, is your values. So we want to make sure that we have aligned whatever career path with your values. So if you want to be a lawyer and you want to be a very high-powered lawyer at a big firm, and you want to be home for your kids, we're going to run into a value conflict at some point. Because for that particular identification of that role and what we know about it and what you want, that particular definition of a lawyer requires very, very long hours. So something's going to need to give. So maybe, we find a different way for you to hit your economic goals or whatever they are, so that you can have this other value also be folded in. So your values are going to play. And then it's kind of like, what are your natural interests? What are you naturally good at? Just because somebody's good at something, sometimes they're just not that interested in it. And then there's driver values. For example, music is one. If you have a strong aptitude towards music, we have to find a container for that. If you are strongly visual, we have to find a container for that. It doesn't mean it has to be part of your career path, but it's part of you. It's part of your essence that needs to be honored.
I love that language of find a container for that. I do a lot of visual mapping and things like Miro boards and Canva and design for a lot of the learning experiences that I do. And I can almost imagine this, like sometimes I use mason jars, like a visual of them and where that could fit on kind of their life map. I want to go back to something you said, Kristin, about getting the gold from all the different levels and you don't know how you're going to use it yet. I have seen that to be true in my own squiggly career. Before I was doing this work, I spent time in the public schools as well as a bilingual teacher, taught abroad in the public schools in Mexico. So now I've taught from 3-year-olds with special needs to corporate learners and university students now. And so this full arc of, teaching in these different places. And there were times, one in particular in my early 20s, I ended up being kind of an accidental co-founder of an ed tech app. And I was doing user experience design and managing programmers, and talk about a moment in time where I had no idea what I was doing, but I was figuring it out as I was going. There was a lot of that, trying to read ahead and listen to TED Talks and read books on user experience. But while that particular app, even though we had 1 million students using it by the end, never made any dollars, and that was sad. What it did in terms of the gold from those different levels, as you explained that, I was remembering that how it taught me user experience design, which I use later in a lot of my strategy work, how it taught me managing programmers and working with engineers that communicated in a very different way than I did, and managing projects across just different people and different communication styles, I'll say. And so I'm just imagining how, even though on paper to me at that time, it was a failed product, even though it pushed the market forward, I'll say, the gold that came from that was really without compare. I didn't get an MBA at that time, but I felt like I had the experience of starting up a company, watching all the different parts of what works and doesn't work. And I brought all those lessons to a lot of the work I do now.
Well, and Tracy, I'd push back on the word failed, just because what is failure? I love the story of Sarah Blakely, whose dad wanted to know, every day at the dinner table, what'd you fail at? It's kind of like you learn so much. So if your failure, it sounds like it was purely financial, But you know what? There's a big piece of pie that was not a failure. And I do think we need to have faith a little bit that some of these things that were not working out the way we think they should are actually working out in ways we can't even begin to understand.
Right.
Nothing is a failure unless you fail to learn from it. That's
Right.
really how I feel about things. And then the universe is set up in such a way that you're going to get it again until you do learn.
Yes. Well, and that's what brought me to that was that idea of the gold, because I was
Mhm.
seeing it as yet like on paper or at face value, it could be considered X, but I do see
Oh,
now in retrospect, many years later, the gold along the way.
yeah.
When people are wrestling with choices,
Mhm.
let's talk about multi-potentialites.
Yeah.
So they have lots of different things they're maybe interested in. And I loved the way you were speaking about, okay, finding a container for that. How do you help people settle in and have the self leadership to know what's next if there's lots of opportunities coming their way?
So it's so interesting. The people who actually struggle the most in career, in my observation, are those who have a lot of high aptitudes because they all conflict with each other. So you could be a doctor, you could be a marketer, you could be a teacher, you could be anything, right? And all of it is juicy and interesting. So, yes, that does happen. And then you get envious of the person who has like one aptitude and knows exactly what they want to do because you're like, oh my God, it's so much easier for you. And here I am with all of this. So, to your point, Tracy, to go back, you find a container for the things that you absolutely have to express. And it becomes a lot of trial and error. So, you can do informational interviewing to find out if a particular field or a particular job is really going to yield what you think it's going to yield.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a great way to start gathering information. A lot of people, like if you're familiar with the Myers-Briggs, there's the part of the personality test, which is perspective, right? And these people have a filter. The reason I'm doing this with my hands is because their filter is wide open. It is wide open. And then you have a J, which is the opposite, and theirs is like so focused. What people don't know about the P and the J is that once a P makes a decision, they're not coming off of it because they went like this. They ticked off. They tried everything before they decided something, whereas a J just went in and did that. So let's look at a menu, for example. Let's say that a career path is like going to the Cheesecake Factory menu. Have you seen that thing? It's like
Yes.
50
I
pages.
took my son there a couple weeks ago and I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many choices.
Oh my God, right? So somebody who has a J personality is going to be like, I want a chicken sandwich. They're going to come in and they're going to order the chicken sandwich, right? And then that's going to be their experience. Or somebody who comes in with this P personality is going to be like, ooh, oh, ah, ee, right? And they're going to try a little bit of everything until they lock in on whatever it is they want. But what's going to happen is they're going to know exactly what they want because they've tried everything else. Whereas the person who has I want the chicken sandwich, and somebody's going to come in later and be like, oh man, you totally missed their Reuben. Like it's the best sandwich I've ever had. And they're going to be like, how did I miss that? Well, because you didn't have that filter open. So a lot of it has to do with trial and error and giving yourself permission and realizing that it is your blessing and your curse to have so many aptitudes and so many things you could potentially do. But it can be lonely. It can be incredibly frustrating. Your career path is going to look, like you said, a squiggly. There's nothing that's going to be linear about it. So just give that up right now. Some folks can keep it, like this woman I was talking about. She had that, who worked in real estate. She was with a company where she got to try on a lot of different jobs that used a lot of different skills. So somewhat in education, you can do that. Somewhat in medicine, you can do that. There's a few different types of career paths where you can have a lot of different roles within that field, but not all of them are like that.
Right. Oh, I love it. You're reminding me that I have found a sense of that myself in the work that I do, because I have different clients. And so sometimes I'm with Fortune 150 clients working with a group of leaders, and we're designing learning experiences for that work and then facilitating them. Other times I'm in a strategic consulting role with a
Great.
nonprofit client. Other times I'm like giving a keynote presentation, all sorts of different roles, different um and it was a bit of the, if not me, then who in some of those spaces, to say, like, who am I to be a speaker? Or who am I to be, until I did it and then realized, okay, there's more of this opportunity. And I think one thing, when I was first considering, okay, what did I do and play as a child? The first thought was I pretended to be a horse a lot, and I'm not really sure where that comes in, but I also did a lot of art. And so those children's encyclopedias, there was one that was make and do.
Yep.
And that one had like paper mache and
Yep.
make his own guitar out of a shoebox.
Yes. Oh, I was right there with you. Ours were by Sunset. That was a name brand that wrote those books.
Yes, and I wanted to find my family had given them away, and so I wanted to find that make and do one. So I actually found it on Etsy and bought just that make and do one. I wanted to write about it for something, but I made the connection later to realize the creativity that I get to bring in. No two learning experiences that I help design are the same, right? And the creativity to sometimes creating these Miro boards that have a lot of visual sense to them, and containers to organize thinking and make some order out of chaos, and liking to organize things and help people with their potential. All of that I can see back in the 6-year-old Tracy that was digging in the drawer at trying to find stuff to make my paper mache horse or whatever.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the beauty of it. If you allow yourself to look at your life without judgment, then there's a lot you get to see.
Oh, I love that. A question's coming to me that is not on my worksheet, but I am wondering what you think about regret.
I have a lot of thoughts about regret. First of all, it's a useless emotion. Nonetheless, we're all going to have it. So the question then becomes, because regret is often found in the shadow side of our personality. Regret is often tied to some type of hurt or wound or something like that, even if it's very shallow, like, oh, I regret that I didn't buy that shirt. That's okay. You can recover from that. But there's deeper regrets. I mean, people regret who they married. People regret losing the family fortune. People regret addiction. People regret all kinds of things. The thing is, there's no power in the past. In some ways, you can't go back and redo it. But what you can do is learn how to be with it and decrease the energy that it's taking from you. So if we think of regret as like one of the wolves in our shadow side, you don't want it to nip at you and bite at you. It doesn't have to be your friend, but you do have to tame that energy. And so I am a person who believes when something comes up, and I've parented this way too, I'm like, if something comes up for you, you go find someone who can help you deal with that. Because when you have a lot of that energy, you lack integrity. And I don't mean like the core of your person. I mean, you're not as strong as you can be. So somebody who's not in their full strength has a lot of things they haven't dealt with. They have hypocrisies. They have outside energy that makes them vulnerable, and regrets can make you vulnerable. And so you want to get into a place where you can acknowledge them, and then you can say, I know new things now, so I would behave differently. There's nobody who walks into this world. It's my belief that we're here to learn. So let me just say that we're here to learn things. ain't no one learning things just like on the fly. Like, you have to go and experience it and be like, woo, that didn't work out the way I wanted it to. And usually that comes with some regret. Like,
Yeah. So it sounds like, Kristin, you're saying that regret can be a teacher. You said it's a useless emotion. However, the lessons from it can be a teacher.
100%.
Daniel Pink has a book called The Power of Regret. And he's got there are 4 core regrets he speaks about, this idea of foundation regrets. Like, if only I had done the work. This is sometimes like if I'd gotten that degree at that time, or they can be like health related, that I didn't take care of my health. And now, anyway, boldness regrets, if I'd taken a chance, like asked the girl out, things like that. Moral regrets, this is, I think, what we typically think of, like that we've made some sort of mistake, and it could be with integrity or something. And then connection regrets, if only I'd reached out, or things like that, or spent time with these people. When you were talking about the example of the values trade-off of the lawyer that also wants to be with her family, like so anyway, that structure has been helpful for me in thinking about regret, like pre-thinking about regret. So using it on the front end to say, what would I regret? And then it helps me have a sense of where my habits might need to lie. So at one point, I love all sorts of different habit trackers. I saw you ask a question on LinkedIn about habit trackers.
You did.
Okay, so I have many different habit trackers. I am kind of obsessed with habits. But one of the things that I tried as my own experiment was to take those 4 categories: foundation, boldness, moral, and connections. I don't think I have it right here, but I had a habit tracker that was organized in that way.
Wow.
So that I would like prevent regret. But what I found was really interesting when I ran this experiment was it really was a values exercise. It helped me focus in on, well, I really value connection with my family and my boys. And I realized that time is flying by, and my oldest son is going to be in middle school next year. And how in the world am I old enough to have a middle schooler? And then I have like a existential crisis. And so, but I go back to this idea of like, how is there a habit, and how am I blocking and spending my time that's in alignment with my desire for connection with them? And it's not a hard and fast rule that if something gets thrown into the schedule that it changes, except for certain days. I have something called no miss mom moments. And this came from actually working with a Fortune 150 client where we were running a workshop, and somebody on that development team from the company had this term that she used personally, and we brought it into the workshop. And now I've brought it into my life. There are days, the first day of school, the last day of school, field day, but like not that Valentine's Day party that's like 30 minutes, it's at like 10:30. Like that one's a no, but these other ones. So anyway, I was just thinking about it from that angle. And yeah, does that bring up anything else for you?
Yeah, well, it does. The moral regret actually is the one that comes to mind, because I don't think we define ourselves until we realize who we aren't in some ways. Mm-hmm. So you make a decision or you engage in a behavior that you then feel regretful about. That's actually how most people then figure out who they are. So let's say you say something really mean to somebody and you can see that you really hurt somebody, and then you're like, ooh, I regret saying that. That would be a moral regret. Everybody does that. That's how we define ourselves. So I just wanted to open that pathway up for people to realize that that's how you learn, so that, if somebody's sitting there in self-judgment about decisions they made, that's how you learn. I do think we know from every ounce of research that your relationships are the thing that lead to the most happiness. And so to your point, setting whatever it looks like for you, however you're prioritizing those relationships that works for you, is going to do exactly what you're saying. It's going to keep you from regretting.
If only people knew, when it comes to preparing for college, what would you say to parents to prioritize?
Teaching them how to make their own decisions and manage their emotions and manage themselves, I think is the most important. So I worked in a high school for 20 years. So I dealt with, ninth grade through 12th grade. And that is a huge time where people are learning how to manage their hormones and their emotions simultaneously. And those two things are interconnected. They absolutely are interconnected. And I'm on the other side of that now with perimenopause, which is a whole different thing, but you do realize how your hormones are connected to everything. So what you want to do is think of yourself as their coach, and you are coaching them into the fullness of who they're going to be, and let them start to lead the process. So let's say that your child comes in and they have a D on a test. Rather than saying, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, your question to them is, how would you like to handle this? And then help them identify the problem. Is the problem that you didn't prepare? Is the problem that you didn't understand the material? Like, let's pinpoint what the problem is, and then why don't you tell me how to best help you? Yeah. And then have them, in counseling we call it gestalt, but like you and I would trade places, and this is something I would do with them a lot. So suddenly I would be the interviewer and you would be the interviewee, but now we'd be like, okay, now you're going to be Mr. Smith and I'm going to be the teacher. So how would you feel if a student said this to you? Because and you do it physically. And also kids are the experts on themselves. You do not have to be the expert. You never have to be the expert on your kid. Ask them, what would be an appropriate consequence for this particular thing? Help me to provide, and you're just trying to elicit from them. It deals with higher level thinking, integrated thinking, when they're starting to think that way about leading themselves, because you need them to be able to walk out the door. You don't want them to hit the first fraternity party and end up face down because they, had no experience or no understanding of what they were about to walk into. You don't want them to get into a toxic relationship because you forbade them to have any relationships. You don't want them to suddenly crash academically because they don't know how to go and get help when they need it.
Yeah.
It really is just coaching them through like you would coach through a manager or anybody else, because they're just managing themselves.
Kristin, I love in that the sense that it's neither like off you go with no support. Like what you just described is a lot of support, but it's who is in the driver's seat of it. And I spend a lot of time in this area of potential, and in particular, some of my background is in early childhood and a focus on neurodiversity, so it brought me into some of this. And I really like the book from Paul Tough, How Children Succeed, and found that really helpful in thinking about the experiences that I want my boys to have as I'm parenting them. And so I've thought about it from that lens. Oh, go ahead.
No, what you just said, though, was so brilliant. You gave thought to what you want your boys to experience. And so many people don't do that. They don't think about the kind of family they want to have. They don't think about the kind of experience they want the kids to have. They don't think about the big outcome of your child are going to leave. If they're healthy, they're going to leave.
Oh, no, they need to get out. It's going to be
right. If they're healthy, that's going to happen. And it usually in senior year, you see it. You see like the kids just start, the moms come in at the beginning of senior year and they're like, oh my God, my baby's leaving. And by the end, they're like, give me their, they're like pushing their stuff out there because something changes. And that happens in all cultures. That is how we are wired. Around 18 years old, we are wired to leave. And you want your child to leave like you were saying.
Right.
Anyway, keep going. I just wanted to really commend you because that's so important.
This is lots of ongoing work, so that feels very affirming.
Yeah.
But I think about it from two ways. One, yes, like what do I want them to experience? But also like in a selfish way, long term, I know it will make my life easier because I really believe in the power of agency. I've seen it in work that I've done in the K-12 space when students academically have agency to own their learning. But I think what people get confused about in that type of agency is that we just say kind of like off you go, instead of the support. So real agency requires, this is actually there was a Harvard research study. It was like 6,000 middle school students, and they were able to predict agency by what teachers ask of students and what they give them. And that always stuck with me because this idea of asking is about high expectations, what they're capable of doing. What if we say, how would you like to handle this? And they say, by doing nothing, what's wrong with this?
When you get something, you are going to keep going back, right? So if somebody always helps you and does your work for you, you're going to, that's what you've learned. And you know whose fault that is? The person who taught you. That's not your fault. And that is something I think the school system really needs to pay attention to, is that learned helplessness is taught. It's not the kid's fault.
What do I do next? What do I do next? What do I do next?
Right, instead of pushing back. But to your point, when you have a different value is what you're talking about. Like your kid's like, it doesn't matter. Why does it matter? Then you either need to adjust your parenting expectations.
Oh, no.
Right. Or talk to them about the bigger picture and help them to start building that out. But to your point, helping them see the bigger picture and saying, okay, it's not just the assignment, it's you being able to plan effectively for an assignment. So when you want success, you know how to get it. So let's break it down that way, because you didn't plan this, and so you made it harder on yourself. Let's see how we can make it easy when you do decide that you want to start engaging in all of your glory.
Kristin, I really like when you want success, you know how to get it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really powerful. I mean, I think this takes us back like full circle into the idea of self-leadership, into really thinking about whether you're somebody listening that is helping people in these roles of coaching and maybe counseling, supporting people, or doing learning experience work. We have a lot of folks in that space, in L&D space, or whether you're thinking about it for yourself, pausing, thinking about your values, thinking about what it is that lights you up, whether that's going back to what you did as a child or what you kind of do in your spare time that lights you up, and how you might get more of that. Is there anything else you want to hit on that we haven't hit on yet?
Well, one of the things I'm doing is developing something called the Field Guide for Personal Power. And it is a program that I am putting into schools because this is so important. And it's based on a concept called locus of control. And if I believe that the control is within me, it's internal. If I believe that it is outside of me, it's external. We know that students who have an internal locus of control have higher motivation, they get in trouble less, they're more successful. It's like 20 different very powerful things. And so the idea that we can and are not teaching this in schools is something that breaks my heart. I actually did a TED Talk on this topic. And I do want to bring that up because we have the power to do it. The schools have the power to do it. And we can teach teachers, we can teach students, we can teach administrators. It also works in a corporate environment as well. But I do think that that is where we're headed as we see, society is changing so much with AI. You're going to want this particular set of skills. Kids are going to need it. Adults are going to need it, just with the changes in the marketplace and how things are going. So yeah, it's a topic that's really close to my heart, and that I'm actively working on trying to get that information out to other people because it matters.
I hope this episode gave you permission to stop chasing a straight line and start embracing the squiggle. And if you want to take this conversation further, subscribe to the Building Thinkers newsletter, where I share a blueprint for thought to go along with each episode that's meant to help you reflect, grow, and act on what matters most. Let's keep building thinkers, one conversation at a time.